Oh, hey there. Imagine walking into a fish store and this is the first thing you see. Now, the first thought you might have when you think planted aquarium is something just like this. It uses high light, CO2 injection, and it requires maintenance at least twice a week. While this tank might look visually appealing, it's a big undertaking, especially for beginners. However, that doesn't mean that your first planted aquarium can't be just as visually appealing. Today, I'll be taking you back to the basics, but without the highlight, CO2 injection, and crazy maintenance schedule. Stay tuned. This is a UNS 60A. Now, I've chosen this tank because it's the same size as a 60U. It holds the same amount of water. However, it has a built-in filtration chamber. The great thing about this tank is that you don't have to worry about what size filter to get, what the flow rate is, and everything that you have to figure out if you were to buy a filtration system separately. Now, just because it has a filtration chamber that's built in, it doesn't mean that there's less space to work with. In fact, there's still plenty of space for you to aquascape in, and I've placed this giant piece, well, there's 2 pieces of driftwood into this tank. Now, keep in mind this is going to be a very beginner-friendly tank. I'll be using low-light plants, no CO2 injection, and trying to keep this tank very low maintenance. Low light plants usually aren't as bright or bold as red stem plants that you might see in a lot of planted tanks. However, I've chosen to use very unique Mazina driftwood to offset that. And in the end, hopefully this tank will look just as impactful as a high-tech tank. So instead of using contra soil or any planted aquarium substrate, I'll only be using sand. Now I'm just adding some rocks to the bottom of the tank just to make the lower level more appealing. I might shift the rocks around once the wood is back in, but for now, this is kind of where I'll be using these rocks as placeholders. Now, because this layout is so hardscape intensive, I'll be taking the wood out and putting the wood back in multiple times, especially during planting, just to make sure the layout looks okay. I'm not just haphazardly placing wood and rock in random places. I want to make sure the plants also flow with the hardscape. So I'm adjusting it a little bit here and there, just to make sure this is the look I want. Let's just have a look. Yeah, this is the layout. This is the layout that I'm very excited for. Okay. All right, what do you think? Leave a comment below and let me know what you think of the hardscape before I start planting. So now on to planting. I'm gonna start first by gluing on some moss to add a little bit of accent on the rocks and also on the wood. It might actually be easier for me to just take out the wood and do this part, but I'm making it a challenge on myself. We'll see how that goes. I might have to contort in different ways. And in between the rock cracks, I will add some boost, short for Bucephalandra, just to give it some more character. The moss I'm using is Physidens fontanus. It's a very feathery moss, and it will give it a very flowy look. Sorry, it's kind of difficult right now. And I'll just add it sparingly throughout, not too continuously, so it gives a lot more natural effect. Now I just gotta remember where I put the glue. Gluing the moss makes it a lot less messy and very fast. I'm gonna also add moss to the driftwood too, not just the rocks. But I wanted to plant the bottom levels first so I can move up as I go. Now on to the next plant. I am now adding Bucephalandra, green wavy, to the different nooks. And over time, the boost, just like Anubias, will self-attach to the hardscape. So right now I'm just relying on the hardscape to hold it in place. But once it's rooted, it will start growing in that area, which is what I want. The boost will add some leafy contrast and character just to the foreground area. I'm using small clumps of it all around. Boost and Anubias are very, very nice looking rhizome plants, so you don't need to plant them in the soil. You just need to attach them to hardscape. But they're going to add that very leafy green character. All right, what do you think? So far, I've added 2 plants, and the bottom layer of the tank is pretty much complete. I might add a few more boosts or mosses scattered around, but for the most part, I'm ready to move on to the wood. Let's move on to the driftwood, which is the main attraction. So I'm gonna use the same Physidens moss, also scattered throughout the driftwood, just to give it a consistent flow throughout. And I'm just gonna find random places to place the moss. Kind of like the moss just started to outgrow and overtake this driftwood that fell into this lake or stream. Just finding areas that I can add to, because in nature nothing is super nice and neat. Everything kind of just grows on their own in random places. So I'm following that mindset. Once again, you don't want to use that much glue. The glue does get messy, especially when you first start the tank. It'll come out very blotchy and you'll get like white little spots where you use too much glue. I'm pretty sure I have some of that right now, but it's okay. Once the moss starts growing out, it will hide all those spots. The most difficult part is finding areas where I can glue without tearing down this hardscape on accident, which may occur. I'm not going to use too much moss because I don't want to hide this awesome hardscape. I actually want to highlight it instead. So the plants are more of a accent rather than the main attraction in this tank. If I feel like I need to add more moss, I will. But for now, I think it looks pretty good. What do you guys think? Now we're on to the last plant. This is probably one of my favorite plants. It's Bobitis, and otherwise known as African water fern. It's a very nice, flowy type of fern plant. I would advise to use it in a 20-gallon tank like this or larger, because this plant can get very large. But I'm gonna rely on its flowy leaves to give this tree some life. And I'm just gonna stick the rhizomes through the twigs, and hopefully when the water flows, it will give it that life that I'm looking to add to this essentially dead branch. And it turns a very nice translucent green color over time once it's healthy and established. I'm being very careful because the leaves are very fragile on this plant. Hopefully don't break the hardscape. I'll fix that in a bit. I'm just looking for areas where I can put this plant. I might have to change out of this jacket just to escape the rest of this tank, actually. And I kind of want this plant to grow downwards over time. So I might just add some ties to attach this plant securely. So it might not look the best in the beginning with all the tie and the glue, but over time, once the plants start to get established, they should look fine. So there you have it. What do you think? Leave a comment below. I was able to create yet another impactful, visually appealing aquascape with just 3 plants And keep in mind, once again, this is going to be a low maintenance, low light, no CO2 planted aquarium. Stay tuned for more updates. Until the next time, bye.